The PFL is doing something this upcoming weekend that Bellator never did, the company that they of course acquired at the end of 2023, and that their main source of competition now in 2025, the UFC, has also never done, and they are traveling to Africa and holding a mixed martial arts event, and it will be taking place in Cape Town. And they have stacked this card with 2 champions and big names such as McKee and former longtime UFC veteran Corey Anderson. The main event will feature Johnny Eblen taking on Castelo Von Steenis. The co-main event will feature PFL's flyweight champion in 2024 and their flyweight champion in 2023 for their European edition, Dakota Ditcheva, taking on longtime Bellator alum Sumiko Inaba. McKee is looking to bounce back from his loss to Paul Hughes, and he's taking on the 10-1 Ahmed Magomedov. And Corey Anderson will look to extend his win streak to 3, and to do so he'll have to take on Denis Goltsov. For the 10-fight Bellator alum that would go on to become a Bellator champion and successfully defend his title twice before the company was acquired by the PFL, Johnny Eblen enters PFL Cape Town with a perfect 16-0 record to his name. He is 33 years old, right in his prime, with 6 knockouts and 1 submission and 9 decision victories, fighting out of American Top Team. He is truly one of the best 185-pound fighters on planet Earth, regardless of organization. He has beaten names such as John Salter, Gegard Mousasi, Anatoly Tokov, Fabian Edwards, Impa Kasanganay, and Fabian Edwards once more in his most recent bout that took place last October at the PFL Super Fight card that was headlined by Francis Ngannou and Renan Ferreira. And he is a 1 of 1 when it comes to grappling and wrestling in the 185-pound division, specifically under the PFL banner. But he's taking on an ultra-dangerous Castelo Von Steenis, who is 16-3, having finished 12 of those 16 with 7 submissions and 5 knockouts, and he is also in his prime at 32 years young. He has won 4 of his last 5 fights and enters this one on a 2-fight finish win streak, both of those wins coming last year, 1 in May and 1 in November. And during his time in Bellator before being acquired by the PFL, he would record a record of 7 wins and 2 losses, with the 2 losses being to Douglas Lima back in May of 2023 and John Salter in November of 2019. And there's no love lost between these two, as there is a little bit of heat and hatred brewing between them as they enter this big-time main event. And we've really not seen Johnny Eblen be tested all that much outside of that fight that he had with Impa Kasanganay at the very first PFL vs. Bellator card last February. Impa would take him to the brink and nearly get the victory in a very close decision, but Johnny would do just enough to get the nod on the scorecards, and now he will look to solidify himself further as one of the best, if not the best, middleweight on planet Earth today, but it's no easy out against Castelo Von Steenis. And the co-main event might as well be the people's main event, because there's not a person alive that isn't intrigued by Dakota Ditcheva and her high-level skill set in the striking realm. And I say she is the best striker in women's mixed martial arts right now. Doesn't matter if you're in one, if you're in the PFL, if you're in the UFC, she is the greatest going right now in the stand-up. At just 26 years of age, she already has a professional mixed martial arts record of 14 wins with 0 losses, 13 of them by way of stoppage, and 12 of the 13 by way of knockout, more often than not via vicious knockout. She's the 2024 Women's Flyweight Tournament winner for the PFL. She's the 2023 Women's Flyweight winner for the European Tournament for the PFL. And the only decision win that she has was way back in March of 2022 in UAE Warriors, meaning that she will enter this weekend on a 9-fight win streak. Scratch that, a 9-fight finish streak, with 7 out of those 9 coming in the very first round. And in 2024, she started to prove to people that she isn't just fighting cans, as so many people love to say about PFL fighters, even said it about Kayla Harrison. And look what she's accomplished since moving to the UFC. I wouldn't quite call the PFL champions can crushers, now would I? And she silenced a lot of haters last year by beating Jenna Bishop, a longtime Bellator veteran, and taking out Talia Santos in the second round of their PFL championship bout, who arguably should have become a UFC champion in her fight with Valentina Shevchenko years ago. And now she will have the opportunity to take on another highly accredited name under the Bellator banner, a homegrown talent for Bellator in Sumiko Inaba, who has a record of 8-1, all 9 of them under the Bellator promotion. The lone loss for Inaba came against Denise Kiholtz in November of 2023, but she has righted the wrong since then, having won her last 2 bouts over Sarah Orozco and Mackenzie Stiller last September, and that one was by way of TKO. And all in all, she's finished 5 of her 8 victories, with 4 of the 5 by way of knockout. The Lady Samurai, fighting out of Hawaii, has the opportunity to play big-time spoiler in this weekend's bout against Dakota Ditcheva, and can prove that she belongs in the discussions for one of the best flyweights on the planet right now. And it's unfortunate for us fans that the biggest storyline surrounding Dakota Ditcheva is, when will she leave the PFL and join the UFC? Because we should just be enjoying the showcases that she continues to put on fight by fight. But at 26 years old, there's still plenty of time for her to grow and enter her prime before jumping ship to the UFC, because ultimately that's what we're going to see her do before it's all said and done. The true way for her to solidify herself amongst the greats in mixed martial arts for female athletes. But until that day, we get to continue seeing her reign supreme in PFL unless Sumiko Inaba plays spoiler this weekend in South Africa. We've got to talk about AJ McKee, who, much like Sumiko Inaba, is a homegrown Bellator fighter. As a matter of fact, all 24 of his professional bouts have been under the Bellator/now PFL banner. And of those 24 fights, he has been victorious in 22 of them across 2 different weight classes at 145 and 155. And this fight will actually be AJ's return to featherweight, having suffered a loss last October to Paul Hughes in the lightweight division, and Paul Hughes would of course go on to challenge Usman or Magomedov and put on one of the best fights in PFL history for the title, where he would fall short and Usman would stay undefeated, but not after an absolute 25-minute war. But prior to that loss to Paul Hughes, AJ McKee was on a 4-fight win streak in the lightweight division. And of course, you can't mention AJ McKee without mentioning that he was a former featherweight champion for Bellator as well, and now he's coming back to his home of 145. Of his 22 victories, he's finished 14 of them with 6 knockouts and 8 submissions. He is still just 30 years young, right in those prime years, and he's a Swiss Army knife who can truly get the job done in all facets of mixed martial arts. And at one point, he may have been the best featherweight on planet Earth, and there were discussions about potentially seeing him take on Alexander Volkanovski before Patricio Pitbull spoiled those plans. And his opponent, Ahmed Magomedov, is 10-1 with 6 submissions and 4 decisions, 29 years old in his prime, and will enter this fight after his most recent fight against Nathan Kelly in January of this year, where he would earn a second-round submission win, and the lone loss on his record came to Henry Corrales in February of 2023, so not a ton of activity for Magomedov over the last couple of years, but he could put all that to the wayside with a massive victory over a big name in AJ McKee this weekend. And lastly, I want to mention Corey Overtime Anderson, who will enter this fight having won his last 2 bouts, both by way of decision against Phil Davis and Carl Moore most recently in March of 2024. So a long layoff for Corey, but now he is back in action at 35 years old, 18-6 overall with 8 knockouts, 10 decisions, and a multiple-year, multiple-fight veteran of the UFC, where he would climb his way into the top 5, but never quite got high enough to challenge for a championship. And it's worth mentioning that this fight is actually taking place in the heavyweight division, so Corey Anderson, the longtime light heavyweight veteran, moving up and taking on an ultra-dangerous Denis Goltsov, who at 35 years old as well has a record of 36 wins and 8 losses, having finished 30 of those 36. This man is dangerous, and he is kill or be killed because he's been finished in 7 of his 8 losses. And as I said off the top, he enters this one on a 4-fight win streak with all of them by way of stoppage, 3 knockouts, 1 submission, 3 of the 4 in round number 1, including wins over Thiago Santos, the former UFC title challenger, and Tim Johnson, the UFC veteran and Bellator title challenger. I see somebody going to sleep in this heavyweight clash, if I'm being quite honest with you, but unfortunately for all of these fights, there's not much really to talk about in terms of stakes, because the title implications and tournaments and everything going on in the PFL is just kind of hard to get a grasp of, if I'm being honest. But nonetheless, these are 4 very massive fights in a very pivotal historic event for the PFL, making their debut on the continent of Africa, in the country of South Africa, in the capital city of Cape Town. I want to get all of your thoughts on this card for the PFL down in the comments below, and what you make of the current state of the Professional Fighters League as we head into the halfway point of the year. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Every single week I preview and break down the biggest and best fights across the UFC and PFL. Unfortunately, the tournaments for the PFL this year haven't quite felt as big as they have in years past, but I will be planning to preview the finals. And alongside breakdowns, I also recap the most meaningful results from every card as well in the aftermath, and I give my thoughts and opinions on MMA news and fight announcements. You can join the discussion and the community on social media at Verbal Spar MMA on X, Instagram, and TikTok, as well as like the Facebook page Verbal Sparring MMA, and you can follow on your favorite audio listening platforms such as Spotify and Apple, where every Monday and Friday podcast episodes release there. Have a great weekend. Enjoy this absolutely stacked weekend of fights with PFL Cape Town and UFC 318, and I will see you all in the next video.